Picture a city that the Victorians called the greatest on earth, and meant it without irony. Now fill it with a darkness so thick with coal smoke and river fog that you can hold your hand in front of your face and lose it completely. Add the smell of a rendering yard, the sound of a woman's laugh that dies too quickly, and the particular moan of the Thames moving through the dark. Because the Thames is always there, a mile of black water, indifferent to everyone on its banks. That's Whitechapel in 1873. Not the Whitechapel of history books, not the one you might know from a certain autumn 15 years from now, when it will acquire a terrible specific fame and a name nobody wants to say. The real Whitechapel. The one where 250,000 people live packed into rookeries so dense that 3 families share a single room, that children sleep in shifts because there isn't enough bed for all of them, that the tuberculosis death rate would make a modern public health official weep into their coffee. The greatest empire in the history of the world surrounds this place. The sun literally does not set on it. Ships leave the Pool of London every day carrying British manufactured goods to every port on earth. The Queen sits at her palace 8 miles west, and her face is on every coin in every pocket on every street. And here you are, in a doorway on Flower and Dean Street. Fog so thick you can taste it. Not metaphorically, you can actually taste it. That particular flavour of coal smoke and moisture and horse manure and river mud that is London air in November. Your boots are wet. They've been wet since Tuesday, and today is Friday, and they have never fully dried. I make these history sleep stories, and I'll be honest with you, if you're here for something gentle and pastoral, this might be the wrong episode, because 1870s Whitechapel is not pastoral. It is cold, and it smells terrible, and the conditions in this district would terrify a combat surgeon. But if you're here because you want to understand how people actually lived, not the famous people, not the ones with portraits done of them, but the actual people, the overwhelming majority of any era, then stay. Get comfortable. Pull the blanket up. Here we go. The fog is everywhere. It comes off the Thames every autumn evening and settles over Whitechapel like something alive, like something that has intentions. The gaslight on the corner of Commercial Street makes a yellow smear in it, barely enough to see your own hands by. Beyond that circle is nothing, just the suggestion of buildings, the sound of footsteps from people you can't see. You've been standing here for an hour. Your name is Agnes Dyer. You're 23 years old, though you look older. The mirror in the Doss house on Flower and Dean Street. The one with the cracked corner, you know the one. It doesn't lie. You look 28, maybe 30. The last 2 years have put something on your face that isn't supposed to be there yet. You came from Kent, from a village outside Maidstone where your father grew hops and your mother grew tired and died of it when you were 16. You came to London because there was nothing left in Kent. The hop-picking work dried up. The farmer who owned the land decided he'd do better with fewer people and more machinery. You had a letter of introduction to a cousin in Bermondsey who turned out to have already moved on to Birmingham, and then you had nothing. And London being London, it found something for you to do with nothing. That was 2 years ago. Right now, in the fog, in the doorway, you are cold in a way that has stopped being acute and become permanent. Your shawl is wool, but it's thin wool, and it's damp, and damp wool smells like wet dog. Your dress is dark. Dark is practical. Dark doesn't show the dirt as quickly. And it's been mended at the hem twice, and needs mending again before the month is out. Your feet hurt. They always hurt. You've walked perhaps 7 miles today. not going anywhere in particular, just moving, because moving is warmer than standing still, and because staying in the doss house during the day costs extra, and you don't have extra. You have fourpence. Fourpence is the price of a bed at Cooney's on Flower and Dean Street. A bed. Not a room. A bed in a room with 11 other women, in a building that houses perhaps 40 people in spaces designed by someone optimistic for 20. The bed is a wooden frame with a straw mattress and a single blanket that has been slept under by hundreds of women before you and will be slept under by hundreds after. You need fourpence by 10 o'clock, or you sleep in the street. Tonight, in the fog, this is the entire architecture of your world. Fourpence, 10 o'clock, the fog getting thicker by the hour. You've done this long enough to know that there are two kinds of cold. There's the cold that wakes you up, makes you sharp and fast and aware of everything. And then there's the cold that settles past your skin and past your muscles and into your bones, the kind that takes the fight out of you, that makes you think about lying down somewhere and not getting up. The second kind is worse. You're closer to the second kind tonight. Somewhere behind you, past the fog, past the invisible buildings, a church bell counts out 7 o'clock. Not just one church. The East End has churches the way it has pubs, too many and too close together. St Mary Matfelon on Whitechapel High Street, old enough that your grandparents' grandparents' grandparents prayed there. Christ Church Spitalfields, Hawksmoor's masterpiece, towering over the market, its stone towers rising impossibly above everything in a neighbourhood where nothing else reaches above 3 stories. A dozen others you know by sound but not by name. They all ring 7. 3 hours until 10. You push off from the doorway. The high street at 7 in the evening is not quiet. It never is, but you knew this already. This stretch of Whitechapel High Street is one of the busiest roads in London, not because it's beautiful or because it leads anywhere elegant, but because it's the main artery between the city and the docks, between the manufacturing east and the commercial centre, and everything that moves by road between those two worlds moves along here. Carts loaded with barrels, cabs carrying men in good coats going somewhere you'll never go. Omnibuses, slow and bright with gas, their upper decks full of passengers who pull their coats tighter when they look down at the street below. The pavement, and not everywhere has proper pavement. Some of the side streets are still mud and cobble, and God help you if it rains, is thick with people. Costermongers packing up their barrows, the last of the day's vegetables going soft in the cold. A man selling eel pies from a tin box, the steam rising, and the smell. If you haven't eaten since morning, the smell of hot food is a form of violence, cheap and hot and just out of reach. You have fourpence. You cannot spend fourpence on eel pie. Women with baskets, children running in packs, some of them working, some of them just surviving, both things looking the same from the outside. Men coming out of the factories and the warehouses and the workshops, the tail end of the shift change, all of them with that particular walk of people who've been using their bodies for 10 hours and would rather be sitting down. And the pubs. There are, on this single stretch of road, more than 20 licensed premises. You know this because you've counted them, not all at once, over time, the way you come to know a place, one piece at a time, one bad experience at a time, one conversation at a time, until the whole picture assembles itself whether you wanted it or not. The Britannia, the Queen's Head, the King's Arms, the Commercial Tavern, the 10 Bells, that's further up in Spitalfields, but you've been there too. You've been to most of them, not for pleasure, not usually. The light from the pub windows is yellow and warm, and through the glass you can see the press of bodies, the blur of conversation. It looks warm. You keep moving. The trick to working the street, and it is a trick, and it took you months to learn it properly, is to look purposeful without looking busy. You can't look like you're loitering, because the police constables who walk this beat know the difference between someone with somewhere to go and someone with nowhere to go, and a woman with nowhere to go on the Whitechapel High Street at 7 in the evening is either going to be moved on or arrested or both, depending on who's walking the beat tonight and what kind of mood they're in. You know most of them. Know their faces, know their rhythms. Constable Williams does the stretch from the London hospital up to Aldgate every hour and a quarter, give or take. He doesn't bother you if you're not obviously soliciting. He's married, probably 2 children. He's tired and he doesn't want the paperwork. Constable Hicks is different. Hicks has opinions, and opinions in a man with a uniform are dangerous. Tonight you catch a glimpse of Hicks at the far end of Commercial Street, his bullseye lantern swinging, and you turn down a side alley before the light finds you. The alley smells like fish guts and cat. There's a pile of something in the corner you don't look at directly. You breathe through your mouth until you're past it and back onto a side street, somewhere between Whitechapel Road and Spitalfields. It's quieter here, narrower. The buildings press in from both sides, their upper stories almost touching overhead, blocking what little sky there is. You know these streets the way you know your own hands. Every alley, every court, every building where you can get cheap shelter, and every building where you cannot. Every publican who'll let you sit by the fire if you buy a halfpenny gin, and everyone who'll have you thrown out just for pushing the door. This knowledge, this particular, useless, essential knowledge, is what 2 years in the East End has given you. You weren't always good at this, that first night, that first week. You'd arrived at London Bridge Station on a Wednesday evening in late November 2 years ago, with 12 shillings in your pocket and the address of a cousin who no longer lived there. It had taken you until midnight to understand that the address was wrong, and that you had no other address to go to. Then it had taken you until dawn to understand what that meant. A woman from the Salvation Army had found you sitting on the steps of a church in Bermondsey at 6 in the morning, shaking. She'd given you tea from a tin pot and listened to your story without the expression of horror you'd expected. She'd seen it too many times. That's what she told you. Too many times. She'd found you a bed at a respectable lodging house in Mile End. A proper bed. A room shared with 2 other women, a landlady who asked where you were employed and seemed satisfied when you said you were looking for work. 3 shillings a week, which was almost everything you had, which meant you had 11 days to find income before you were back where you started. The decent jobs went first. You tried the factories. Bryant and May's match factory in Bow was hiring. You went. Stood in line for 2 hours in the cold, got close enough to the door to smell the phosphorus before they shut the gates. Quota full. The lead works in Stratford wanted women, but the foreman looked at you in a way that meant something specific, and you left. The laundries. God, the laundries. 14 hours standing in steam up to your elbows in scalding water for 8 shillings a week, which sounds like something until you understand what 8 shillings a week actually means in London in 1871. 8 shillings a week means you pay for your bed and then you eat bread. You'd held out for 6 weeks. 6 weeks of factories and laundries and the kind of hunger that makes you lightheaded by the afternoon. 6 weeks of watching other women come home from their evenings with rent money in their pockets. 6 weeks of telling yourself you were better than this. You were from a respectable family. Your father was a man who went to church. Your father was a man who went to church and then died of pneumonia in an agricultural labourer's cottage while the landlord raised the rent. 6 weeks. And then one November night, colder than this one, foggier than this one, you'd stopped pretending. You don't let yourself think about it too much. Thinking about it is a luxury, and luxuries cost energy you don't have. What you do instead is move. Back out onto the high street, timing it for when Hicks has his back turned. The costermongers are fully packed up now. The workers have dispersed into the pubs and the courts and the doss houses. The street is thinner but never empty. It's never empty, the high street. And the particular population of the later evening is different from the daytime crowd. You recognise some faces. Lizzie, who works this same stretch of pavement, older than you by 10 years and harder by 20. A woman who moves through the world with the particular grace of someone who has spent so long being invisible that she's mastered it. Nod from Lizzie, nod back. You're not friends exactly, but you're something. The word doesn't exist yet, or doesn't exist in any vocabulary that polite society keeps. Mary Ann, you know her as Polly, which is what everyone calls her, who is sitting outside the frying pan on Brick Lane eating something from a paper. Polly's 38 and has been in the East End for years and has opinions on everything. Sometimes she shares them whether or not you've asked. Fog's bad tonight, Polly says without looking up. Always is this time of year. Makes the men nervous. She finishes whatever she's eating, crumples the paper, lets it fall. Nervous men are bad business. Nervous men are just men. She looks up at you with an expression that might be amusement or might be pity or might be both at once, and goes back to her food. You keep walking. The cold has moved up from your feet into your ankles. Your left boot has a crack in the sole that the wet gets through, and you've been packing it with folded newspaper. Today's edition. 2 weeks of news turned to insulation. But the newspaper degrades with the damp, and by tonight you can feel the cobblestones through the paper and through the thin leather of the sole. 4 more hours, approximately. The hunger is manageable. You ate this morning. Bread from the penny baker's on Commercial Street. 2 slices, with a scraping of dripping from the tin the woman in the doss house keeps and charges a farthing access to. 2 slices of bread and dripping at 7 in the morning, and since then nothing. You're good at managing hunger now. You've had practice. The trick is to not think about food directly. Think around it. Think about where you'll be in an hour, what you'll do when you have the 4pence secured, whether there's any chance of doing better than 4pence tonight. Sometimes there is. Sometimes a good night, a lucky night, you come back with more than enough. Sometimes you get something warm to eat at the coffee stall on Whitechapel Road, the one that stays open until midnight for precisely the people who can only afford food at midnight. Sometimes you don't get the 4pence. You try not to think about those nights either. Here's what nobody tells you about this life. Or maybe they do tell you and you don't believe it until you live in it. It's not the men that are the hardest part. That sounds wrong. Let me explain it more carefully. The men, the actual work, the actual transactions, those are frightening in a specific, manageable way. You learn the warning signs fast if you're going to survive long enough to learn them at all. The particular way a man holds himself when he's drunk past a certain point. The ones who won't look you in the eye. That can mean shy, harmless, or it can mean the opposite, and you learn to feel the difference before you can articulate it. The ones whose friendliness feels like a performance. The ones who ask too many questions about where you're from, where you live, whether anyone knows you're here. You develop instincts. They're not perfect. Nothing is perfect in this life. But they're real, and they're yours, hard won. No, the hardest part is the time between. The hours when you're not working, not eating, not sleeping, when you're just existing in the particular limbo of the streets, when it's raining at 3 in the morning and you've made enough for the bed but not enough for food, and you're so tired that the tiredness has stopped feeling like a sensation and become more like a colour, a grey colour, everything tinged with it. The hardest part is the arithmetic, the ceaseless grinding arithmetic of subsistence. Everything reduces to it. 4pence for the bed, a penny for tea, a halfpenny for bread. The whole day is an equation you solve in real time with your body and your time and whatever you have left of yourself. Some women drink their way through it. The gin. Gin is cheaper than food in terms of the relief it provides per penny. You understand this in a way that frightens you. The way you understand it, the way you can see exactly how a person gets there, step by logical step. You drink, you'd be lying if you said you didn't. Some evenings you pass through the pub not to work, but just to get warm and drink enough to stop feeling everything so loudly. But you've watched what happens to the women who go further than that. You've seen Polly on the bad nights, when she's had too much, and the particular vacancy comes into her eyes. You've seen women who've been drinking since morning, sitting in the gutter outside the pub doors with their skirts in the mud past noticing. You're frightened enough of becoming that to keep yourself from it. Mostly. The night moves. The fog thickens and then thins slightly around 9 o'clock when the wind comes up off the river, and you can see further along the pavement, the gas lamps making proper circles again instead of just suggestions of light. You've been walking. This is most of the job. This is what nobody understands who hasn't done it. The walking. The sheer quantity of walking. Miles and miles of it. Not to get anywhere, but to stay visible without being obviously stationary. To cover enough ground to encounter enough people. To keep warm enough to keep functioning. Your feet inside the wet boots have gone from painful to numb. Numb is better, and numb is worse. Better because you stop feeling the pain. Worse because you stop feeling the warning. You've learned to check your feet every time you sit down, something you never would have thought to do 2 years ago. A man outside the 10 Bells. You've walked further than you meant to up into Spitalfields. A man outside the 10 Bells says something to you. He's maybe 40, workman's clothes, a good coat though, which means a foreman or a skilled man, someone with a weekly wage rather than a daily one. He's not hostile, he's just present. You talk. Or you do the thing that looks like talking, that uses the same equipment as talking but is actually a negotiation, a series of assessments, a mutual reading of risk. He's from somewhere in the Midlands, Birmingham maybe, the accent isn't London. He's in the city for work, he says. He seems ordinary in the specific way that makes you cautious, because the dangerous ones often seem ordinary. You agree. A price. A place. Not the alley he suggests. You have a particular arrangement with a woman who rents a room on Fashion Street. It costs you a penny, the room, and the woman who keeps it is called Mrs. O'Brien, and she is 60 years old and has been making this arrangement for so long that she accepts it the way she accepts the weather. You've used Mrs. O'Brien's room 12 times now. The regularity of it, the having a place, is its own kind of comfort. Mrs. O'Brien opens the door without being asked, takes the penny and closes herself back into her kitchen. The room smells like cabbage and tallow and the particular layered human smell of a space that's been lived in hard. There's a window with a piece of sacking nailed over it instead of curtains. A bed, a real bed, wooden frame, proper mattress, even sheets, though the sheets are grey from washing. A candle on a tin plate. 20 minutes. And then you're back on Fashion Street with money in your pocket and the walk to Flower and Dean Street ahead of you. Flower and Dean Street. They call it the Flower of Dean Street in the lodging house jokes, a name so grimly ironic that it circles back around to something like affection. There are no flowers on Flower and Dean Street. There is no Dean. There is no street, really. It's more of an alley. 100 yards of compressed humanity, a single road lined on both sides with doss houses that have been here since before your parents were born. This is where the East End puts the people who have nowhere else to go. Not exclusively. There are respectable poor on this street too. People who work honest jobs and simply cannot afford anything better. But predominantly. Flower and Dean Street is where the women who work the streets sleep, where the men who can't or won't work the docks sleep, where the Irish families displaced by 15 years of steady migration sleep. Cooney's is the largest of the doss houses, 40 beds in the women's dormitory and another 20 in the kitchen. The dormitory tonight is half full when you push through the door. The smell hits you the way it always does, even after 2 years. There is no getting used to it entirely. 40 women and the remnants of whatever they've eaten today, and the coal fire in the corner that fills the room with smoke that has nowhere to go, and the particular staleness of air that's been breathed too many times. You hand your fourpence to Mrs. Chambers, the woman who runs the dormitory, who is not cruel, but is not kind, who deals in the economics of subsistence with the same detached efficiency as everyone else in this economy. And you find bed 8. The straw mattress crinkles when you sit on it. The blanket is rough wool, the kind that scratches. You've slept under it for weeks and it still scratches. You take off your wet boots. This small act, taking off the wet boots, is the best moment of every day. Your feet are cold and damp and the soles of your stockings are filthy, and without the boots the air gets at your skin and the relief is immediate physical, disproportionate to the action. Jessie comes in at 10:30. She's the woman in bed 7, a Scotswoman, mid-50s, works in the jute factory in Stepney, and she nods at you. She smells like she's come directly from the factory, that particular jute smell, fibrous and dusty and industrial, the smell of something being processed into something else. She peels off her boots with the same ceremony you've observed every night, and lowers herself onto her mattress with the care of a woman whose body has done 10 hours of hard physical work. Cold out, she says, foggy. Always is this time of year. Night, Jessie says. Night. You pull the blanket up to your chin and stare at the ceiling. The ceiling of Cooney's dormitory is low and stained. There's a brown watermark in the plaster above bed 8 that looks, if you tilt your head, like a map of something. Some country you'll never visit. A coastline. A river delta. You stare at it for a while, then sleep. The morning comes back around with the particular indifference of mornings, not light. It doesn't get properly light until nearly 8, and you're awake well before that. What wakes you is sound. Mrs. Chambers moving through the dormitory at 5:45, her heavy boots on the wooden floor, telling people that the lodging house turns out at 6, that anyone still in their beds at 6 will be charged for another night. Around you, women begin to move. The specific sounds of a crowded room coming back to life. Coughing. There's always coughing. November in the East End means coughs that go on for months, and the crinkle of straw mattresses and the slap of cold water from the basin in the corner and muffled conversation. You lie still for as long as you dare. The blanket is warm with your body heat, and the moment you throw it back, the cold will be immediate and exact. But you need to. So you do. The floor is cold under your feet, even through your stockings, even through everything. Cold that comes up from the boards in a way that suggests the cold goes down a long way below the building. You dress. Your dress from yesterday, which is the same as your dress from the day before, which is the same as every day. You have two dresses. One is this one. One is worse. Your hair you pull back, pin, cover with the bonnet that you take from under your pillow. You sleep on it, which keeps it from being taken. In a room with 40 women, you learn quickly what needs protecting. The bonnet is black straw, good quality once, now bent into a shape that is optimistic at best. Boots on, the left boot still wet from last night. The newspaper packing from yesterday is a grey paste against the inner sole. You pick it out with your fingernail, look at the crack in the leather. You'll manage. You always manage. 6 in the morning in the East End in November is not dawn. It's one gradation of grey shifting into a slightly different grey. The fog not lifted but changed in quality. And the street sounds changing from the sounds of the middle of the night to the sounds of the beginning of the day. The costermongers are setting up. This is the most reliable sound of early morning Whitechapel. The arrows being wheeled into position, the boxes of goods being arranged. They get their stock from Spitalfields market, which opens at 4 in the morning, which means the people who supply you have been awake since 3. You buy a mug of tea from the coffee stall on Whitechapel Road. A penny for a mug of hot tea. It's been brewing since 5. It's dark as coal and twice as bitter, but it's hot, and the mug warms your hands through your fingerless gloves. The wool of the gloves is thin at the fingers, worn down to single layer, and the cold comes through anyway. But the ceramic of the mug is better, and you wrap both palms around it and hold. You stand at the side of the stall and drink and watch Whitechapel come back to life. This is one of the things about this life that no one who hasn't lived it would expect. There are moments that are almost good. This is one of them. The mug of tea, the street coming to life around you, the temporary warmth, the sense of being part of something, even if the something is just the city waking up. It doesn't last long. It lasts exactly as long as the tea takes to drink, and then the mug goes back, and you're back to the cold and the arithmetic. Today is Saturday. Saturday significant because it's payday for the docks. When the dockers get paid on Saturday, a percentage of that pay goes immediately into the pub. Some of it stays there. Some of it comes out again in men who are warm and paid and feeling generous or reckless or both. Saturday evenings are better for business. You have all day before that changes anything. The factories, you still try. This is something Polly finds baffling and Lizzie finds somewhere between admirable and stupid. But you still spend some days trying the factories, trying the laundries, trying the various establishments that might theoretically employ a woman in her 20s with no particular skills and a decent ability to follow instructions. Today is one of those days. You walk up Commercial Street to the Spitalfields area, where the silk weaving trade that used to dominate this whole neighbourhood is down to its last gasp, but not completely dead. The Huguenot weavers who came here 200 years ago, fleeing religious persecution in France, built an industry that made Spitalfields famous. Their descendants are still here, still weaving, but the power loom has been killing the hand loom for 30 years, and by now there's almost nothing left. Almost nothing is not nothing. A woman near Christchurch Spitalfields is sorting silk thread in a doorway. She's doing it for a workshop a few streets over, taking the sorted thread back in batches, getting paid per weight. You know this type of piecework. You know what it pays. They taking anyone on, you ask? She looks at you, assessing. The kind of look that takes in everything in 2 seconds. How you're dressed, what you look like, what story you're likely to tell, and comes to conclusions that are probably mostly accurate. Maybe, she says, workshops on Fashion Street. Ask for Mr. Kaminsky, but he's particular. Particular how? She goes back to her sorting. Just particular. You thank her and walk to Fashion Street. Not the room with Mrs. O'Brien, the other end of Fashion Street where the workshops are. Brick buildings with windows too small for the amount of light the work requires, but windows are expensive and light is cheap if you just make do with less. Kaminsky's workshop is the one with the blue door that has been blue since before it was blue. You can see at least 3 previous coats of paint underneath this one, all of them different blues, like the building keeps trying to become something and not quite making it. Inside it's warm, hot actually. The looms generate heat, and the people generate heat, and the windows don't open, and what you smell first is silk. The particular slippery, dusty smell of silk thread being worked. And what you smell underneath that is human beings in a confined space for 12 hours. Mr. Kaminsky is a small man with impressive side whiskers and a tape measure around his neck that looks like it's been there so long it's become structural. He looks at you over the tape measure. Work? Yes, sir. I can do sorting, threading, any basic work. He looks at you the way people in this area have learned to look at women who come looking for work, with a sort of exhausted compassion that stops well short of employment. I'm full up. Been full up since August. I can put your name. A list. A list. You know the list. You've been on lists. The lists are very long. You put your name on the list and go back out into the cold. This is the other thing nobody tells you. The legitimate work. The work that women in the newspapers, in the pamphlets, in the earnest sermons, hold up as the alternative. It's not there. Not in sufficient quantity. Not for the quantity of women who need it. The arithmetic doesn't work. There are 50 women applying for every position in the factories. There are women who've been on the waiting list for laundry positions for 6 months. The philanthropists who come to the East End to save women from the streets build establishments that can hold 20, 50, 100, and then congratulate themselves while the streets remain full. This is not a personal failing. You've had to understand this slowly over 2 years, because the whole world tells you it is a personal failing, tells you there is always honest work for honest women, tells you that this life is a choice. It is not a choice the way they mean it. It is a choice the way stepping onto a lifeboat is a choice when the ship is going down. You choose it over the alternative, but the alternative is drowning. You spend the morning walking and trying. The laundry on Durwood Street, full up. The brush-making factory near Aldgate, not hiring women today. The place that makes paper bags for the market stalls, paying 3p a gross, which means you could earn 6p for 2 hours of work if your hands are fast enough, which on a cold morning with stiff fingers is an optimistic projection. You take the paper bags. The woman who runs the paper bag operation works from her kitchen. Her name is Mrs. Flynn, and she has 4 children moving around her kitchen table, And she does not care about your story or your background. She cares about whether you can fold accurately and quickly. You fold a sample bag under her supervision, which requires creasing the paper against the edge of the table with the heel of your hand. Score, fold, tuck, press, and she nods. You work for 2 hours in Mrs. Flynn's kitchen. The paper is rough against your fingertips in the particular way that repeated paper contact is rough. The edges catching at the skin, the tiny cuts that accumulate into a general rawness across your first 2 fingers. Your hands are cold at first, and then warm with the work, and then warm and raw and moving almost on their own. The kitchen smells like boiling laundry and fried onion, and the bread that's on the table that the children keep tearing pieces from. You try not to look at the bread. You fold, score, fold, tuck, press. You fall into the rhythm of it. There is something almost meditative about this. Almost, if you don't think too hard about the 2d per gross, or the width of your fingertips, or the distance between this kitchen and the life you used to think you'd have. Score, fold, tuck, press. By the time Mrs. Flynn counts out your wages, you've done 2 gross and change. 6pence. She rounds up to a halfpenny extra because you were careful with the edges. You thank her and mean it. 6pence and a halfpenny. Plus the 4pence from last night, which you haven't spent yet. 10pence halfpenny. You've been in London 20 months and you know down to the farthing what this amount of money means. 4pence for tonight's bed, a penny for tea, a penny for bread. That leaves 2pence halfpenny. 2pence halfpenny is a cushion. 2pence halfpenny means if tonight is slow you can still sleep inside. You don't let yourself feel good about 2pence halfpenny. Feeling good about 2pence halfpenny has a way of making you careless about earning more. Spitalfields. Market on a Saturday is so crowded as to be almost dangerous. Not dangerous the way certain alleys are dangerous. Not dangerous the way certain men are dangerous. Dangerous in the purely physical sense. Too many people in too little space. The barrows and the carts pressing through the crowds that press through the market. Everyone shouting at once. The smell of everything at once. The market spills out beyond its formal boundaries in every direction. The streets around Spitalfields Church, those vast stone steps, Hawksmoor's impossible towers, everything about the building designed to remind you how small you are in comparison to the things that outlast you, are lined with vendors who can't afford or didn't get a pitch inside. They sell from blankets on the ground, from the steps themselves, from their hands, vegetables and fruit and flowers. Actual flowers somehow, incongruously, a woman selling violets from a basket, brilliant purple against the grey November light. Meat from a cart with wheels that look like they've given up. Fish, the smell of which follows you for half a block after you pass it. Old clothes. The second-hand clothes trade in this part of London is vast. An entire economy in worn garments moving from the people who could afford new ones down through successive hands until they end up as rags. And somewhere in that chain there are women in good coats that cost 3 shillings. You stop at the second-hand clothes. The stall is a woman of indefinite age, anywhere from 40 to 60, the kind of face that stopped worrying about age when it had more pressing things to worry about, with an absolute mountain of clothing piled on a trestle table and hanging from a rail behind her. Your left boot, the crack. You look at the boots on the table. There are 4 pairs, all mismatched, all various stages of worn. You pick up a brown pair that might be your size. The heel is slightly worn down on the outer side, which means whoever wore them walked with a particular gait. You try the right one on over your stocking. It fits. The woman is watching. 3pence, she says. Tuppence. They're good boots. The heel's gone. A cobbler fixes that for a penny. She's right. You do the arithmetic. Tuppence plus a penny for cobbler equals thruppence for boots that actually keep the water out. It makes sense. Tuppence halfpenny, you say, right now in your hand. She takes it. The brown boots go into your bag. You feel strangely good about this. The strange competence of it. The negotiation. The outcome. You're good at this now. You're good at the transactional part of things. The measuring of what's worth what and who will accept what. This would be a useful skill in another life. The afternoon slows. Saturday afternoons in the East End have a particular quality. The morning rush of the market giving way to the quiet before the evening rush. The daylight fading earlier than it should because the November clouds are low and dense, and the smoke from 1,000 chimneys thickens everything above the rooftops. You eat. At the coffee stall again, not just tea this time, bread. Bread and a scraping of butter. The bread is yesterday's bread, penny a slice, and you eat slowly and deliberately, tasting it, not wolfing it the way you did that first month when the hunger made everything about eating feel desperate and animal. Now you know how to eat like you have enough. The pretending matters, not for other people, though that too, but for yourself. If you eat like someone who has enough, your body behaves differently. Your face looks different. You walk differently. Sitting on the step of a closed shop with your bread, watching the street, you think about the woman you used to be. She went to church on Sundays. She knew every person in her village by name. She could identify 12 varieties of apple by sight. She'd never been on a train before the one that brought her to London. She would not recognise you. You're not sure whether this is a loss or whether it's just what happens when you survive long enough. There's a woman the other women call Mother Barnett, who isn't anyone's mother, but everyone calls her that anyway. She runs a rooming house on Thrall Street, a step up from Cooney's, 4pence halfpenny a night instead of 4pence, which buys you a room with only 6 women in it instead of 12. And in the evening she sits outside her door on a wooden chair regardless of the weather, and watches the street the way a landlady watches a street she's owned for 30 years. Mother Barnett knows everything. Not officially. She doesn't position herself as knowing everything, but if you ask her, she'll tell you. You find her in her chair. Agnes, she says, as if she was expecting you. Mrs. Barnett. Cold today? Always is this time of year. She looks at you. The look takes in the new boots in your bag, the way you're standing, the colour in your cheeks from the walk. You look tired, she says. I'm fine. You look tired, she says again, not unkindly, as if the information is useful rather than critical. You've heard about the woman on Bucks Row? You haven't. What woman? Found her this morning. Early before light. She was hurt badly. The specific silence that comes with this kind of statement on this street fills the space between you. Did she? She's alive at the London hospital, but a pause. You know how it goes. You know how it goes. She was on the street, you say. Not a question. She was on the street. A man walking past the end of Thrall Street, not looking in your direction. A cart going somewhere with something. The ordinary movements of the world. Did they get who? Not that I've heard. You think about Bucks Row. It's not far. Maybe 3 minutes walk. You've been down Bucks Row dozens of times at all hours. It's not particularly more dangerous than any other street in this part of the East End. It's not particularly safer either. You're careful, Mother Barnett says. Not a question. I try to be. Try harder. She adjusts the knitting in her lap. She's always knitting, big rough woolen things that she sells. There's a man been seen around Whitechapel this last month. different women, different nights, asks them to go to a particular place, pays up front, which is unusual, which should make you cautious, not comfortable. Paying up front is also what someone does when they want you somewhere specific before you can change your mind. You're quiet. Not every man who pays up front is dangerous, she adds, but every dangerous man pays up front. You file this away. This is the kind of information that costs nothing to receive and potentially everything not to have. I'll be careful, you say. Good. She looks back down at her knitting. Needles clicking, the sound sharp and precise. On your way, then. Evening won't come any slower for you standing here. Saturday evening. The dock's paid out at noon, which means by 6 o'clock the money has been distributed through the pubs in the way that money in the East End always eventually distributes itself. From the men who earned it to the establishments that relieve them of it, through gin and beer and hot food and the other commerce that happens around the edges. The High Street is loud in the specific way it gets on Saturday evenings, more reckless. The particular energy of people who've spent 6 days working and have 24 hours to not work. Lizzie is near the bottom of Commercial Street. She nods. Good crowd, she says. Not as cold tonight. No. This is most of what you say to each other. You've worked out a system, over months, over the small negotiations of proximity. You don't work the same side of the street. You don't compete for the same men, or not directly. You look out for each other the particular way that doesn't have a name. If Lizzie sees something concerning about someone you're talking to, she'll pass close enough to signal it. You do the same for her. Nobody asked for this arrangement. It just happened. The way the practical things happen in this life, not through agreement, but through necessity gradually arranging itself into pattern. You work the evening. I'm going to be plain about what that means and not dwell on it more than necessary, because the details aren't the point. The point is the mechanics and the texture of it. The standing and the walking and the conversations that start as something else and turn into something else, and then return to standing and walking. The economics of it. The price you name and the price they offer and the distance between those two numbers. The quick reading of character that you've become faster at than you ever wanted to be. You talk to maybe 8 men over the course of the evening. 6 of those conversations go nowhere. Men who are curious and drunk and don't actually want to spend money. Men whose friends are watching and whose nerve fails. Men who want something specific that you don't provide. Men who seem dangerous in the particular way that makes you end the conversation abruptly and move on. Without explanation. Without apology. You've learned that this is allowed. 2 of the conversations go somewhere. By 9 o'clock you have 1 shilling and 10p in your pocket. This is a good evening. Not exceptional. You've had evenings that reach 3 shillings, evenings you can count on one hand. But a good evening. 1 shilling and 10p means you can buy a better meal tomorrow. Means the 2p halfpenny cushion stays cushion, instead of becoming operating capital. Means you go to bed tonight without the arithmetic running in your head. There's a soup kitchen. You found out about it in the spring from a woman you've since lost track of. Thursday and Saturday evenings, a church in Spitalfields does a soup distribution. Proper soup, not the thin water and turnip stuff. They have bread and soup and they give it to whoever comes, and they don't require you to listen to a sermon first, which is either admirably practical or a missed opportunity depending on your perspective. Tonight, on your way back with 1 shilling and 10p in your pocket, you stop. The queue is maybe 30 people long. Women mostly. A few children. A couple of elderly men who look like they've been in this queue in various forms their entire lives. You stand behind a young woman, 17, 18, something like that. She's wearing a shawl that's too thin for November, and her hair is down. Not styled, just down. Like she hasn't thought about it. She looks new. The specific newness of someone who hasn't been in the East End long enough for the East End to have taken hold yet. She's trembling slightly, the cold probably, or nerves, maybe both. Your first time, you ask? She looks startled, then defiant. Then, when she registers that you're not judging, that obvious? A bit. She looks at her hands. They're chapped. Not the worn-down chapping of someone who's been doing physical work for years, but the fresh, raw chapping of someone who's recently started something cold and wet. Laundry, maybe. I'm Alice, she says. Agnes. You're from London? No, Kent. You? Hertfordshire. She says it with the particular mixture of homesickness and determination that you recognise from your own first months. I've been here 3 weeks. 3 weeks. You remember 3 weeks. Working, you ask? At a laundry, on Mile End Road. A pause. They cut my hours this week. Said trade was down. She looks at you with the directness of someone who doesn't yet know how not to be direct. Is it always like this? You think about how to answer. The true answer is complex, and the honest answer is frightening, and the practical answer is somewhere between the two. Some things get easier, you say. Some things stay the same. That's not... No, you agree. It's not. She's quiet. The queue moves forward. The smell of the soup reaches you. Real soup. There's meat in it. You can smell the fat. There's a hostel, you say, near Mile End, cheaper than a doss house, for working women. You're better off there than in some of the places you might be looking at. She gives you a look that says she understands you've assessed a situation more accurately than you've stated. I know what doss houses are, she says. I know you know. A pause. I came to London because my mother said there was work here. She said London was full of work. She said any woman willing to work hard would find... Your mother hasn't been to London. No. The laugh is brief and not happy. No, she hasn't. You reach the front of the queue. The woman serving the soup is a churchwoman, middle-aged, competent, looking at you without any particular expression of judgment or sympathy. Just the practical face of someone doing a job that needs doing. She hands you a bowl. The bowl is hot in your hands. The soup is thick and it steams. You wrap both hands around the bowl, and for a moment the warmth is so complete and so immediate that you close your eyes. Just for a second, just to have it. Alice receives her bowl. You move to the side, sit on the steps of something nearby and eat. Carefully, not quickly, tasting it. Bread too, which you dip into the soup until it softens. Alice sits beside you without being invited. You don't move away. Are you going to be all right? She asks. It takes you a moment to realise she's asking about you, not herself. I'm going to be fine, you say. She nods, eats her soup. 2 women from counties that aren't London, eating soup in a November street. The church behind you, the street in front of you, the whole machinery of the East End grinding away on all sides. The hostel, you say. It's on Eric Street, just off Mile End Road. Ask for the superintendent. Tell her Agnes Dyer sent you. That won't help. She doesn't know me, but it'll make you sound like you know someone. Alice looks at you. That doesn't make any sense. No, you agree. But you'll seem more certain of yourself, and certain is always better than uncertain, especially when you're asking for something. She seems to file this away. Thank you, she says. Don't thank me. Eat your soup before it gets cold. Later. walking back up Commercial Street toward Flower and Dean Street, with the soup warm in your stomach and a shilling and 10 pence in your pocket and the new boots in your bag, you think about something Mother Barnett said once. Not tonight. Months ago. You'd asked her how she got through it, not how she survived. You knew the mechanics of surviving. You asked how she got through the rest of it. She'd been quiet for a long time, long enough that you thought she wasn't going to answer. Then, you find one thing a day that was worth doing. Doesn't have to be big. Doesn't have to be anything. You find one thing, and you hold on to it. You hadn't understood then. You thought it sounded like the kind of thing people say when they want to seem wise without having to be specific. You understand now. Tonight the thing is Alice. The thing is the soup that tasted like someone cared about making it correctly. The thing is the boots negotiated the right price. The thing is the shilling and 10 pence in your pocket instead of nothing. Any one of those would do. You choose the soup. Sunday. The bells start at 8 and they don't really stop, one church feeding into another, the sound layering into something that is less music than presence, like the city itself is clearing its throat. You don't go to church. You haven't been inside a church since you arrived in London. This bothers you sometimes. Your father's face appears, the slightly reproachful expression he would deploy without comment, more effective than any lecture. But there are things that require more energy than you have, and faith in your current circumstances is one of them. Instead, Sunday is the day you try to do the things the weekdays don't leave room for. Today, you take your dress to the public washhouse on Commercial Road. The public washhouse is 1 shilling a quarter, which is still expensive in absolute terms, but for that shilling you get 4 hours of use of a copper and a wringer, and a tub of hot water, and a mangle, which is more than the cold basin at the Doss House can offer. You take the dress and your stockings and the worst of your other things, and you spend 2 hours washing them in the hot water, which turns grey almost immediately and then darker grey, and winding them through the mangle until they drip rather than stream, and then hanging them on the lines in the drying room. While your dress dries, you're wearing the other dress, the worse one. But no one's judging in the washhouse. The women in the washhouse are doing the same thing, washing the week out of their clothes, restoring some approximation of cleanliness. Most of them are working women, wives of labourers, women from the factories. Some of them know each other. There's a conversation going in the corner between 3 women who seem to be all from the same street, arguing about something in a tone that suggests it's been argued about before, and will be argued about again, and everyone is comfortable with the disagreement. You wash in silence. Your hands go red in the hot water and the soap. Strong lye soap that cleans properly but strips the skin. And your fingernails, when you examine them, are cleaner than they've been all week. The dress takes an hour and a half to dry. You sit in the heated drying room and watch the steam rise from the hanging clothes, and the warmth is genuine warmth, the kind that gets into your muscles, and you fall half asleep. Not fully. You don't fall fully asleep in public places anymore. Something in you stays alert even when the rest of you rests. This has happened so gradually over 2 years that you didn't notice it as it happened. You just noticed one day that you never fully let go anymore, that some part of you was always monitoring the door. But half asleep in the warm is still something. Sunday afternoon you do something you don't do often. You walk west. Not far, not to the proper West End, not to the streets where the good shops are and the women in good dresses with their husbands and their maids and their complicated hats. But west of Whitechapel, into the city, the square mile of old London, and then a little further to London Bridge. You've been to London Bridge a handful of times. Each time it surprises you, which is strange because you know what's there, you've seen it. It's just a bridge. But the thing it gives you, the view it gives you, never quite stops surprising you. You cross to the middle of the bridge and lean on the stone railing and look. The Thames is wide here, the widest point you can see from ground level. The water is the particular colour of Thames water, which is to say it is not a colour anyone would choose for a river. A brownish grey, a grey that suggests everything that has gone into it. The drainage of half the city, the effluence of the tanneries and the slaughterhouses and the factories that line the banks, the waste of 1,000,000 people. But from this height, from this distance, it looks almost like something. The ships. That's what gets you. Every time. The ships in the Pool of London, between London Bridge and the Tower, are so numerous that the masts look like a forest of bare winter trees, dozens of them, some of the ships 3-masted, some smaller, all of them loaded or waiting to be loaded with things that have come from somewhere unimaginable and are going somewhere else equally unimaginable. This is the commercial heart of an empire, right here. These ships, that cargo, cotton from America, tea from India, the Indian Empire which was brought under direct crown control just 15 years ago, after the mutiny, after the years of the East India Company running things like its own private kingdom, silk from China, spices from islands you can barely locate on a map, even if someone gave you one. Rubber recently. The rubber trade is still relatively new, but it's growing fast. You know this because one of the men you talked to last month was a trader in rubber, and he told you more about the rubber trade than you ever expected to know. He was nervous and talked too much, and you let him, because nervous and talkative is better than the alternative. Wool from Australia, which is full of British people who were sent there involuntarily or went there because they had no choice. Their wool comes back. Trade flows in strange circles. And underneath all of it, sugar, cotton, the trade routes that were built on the forced labour of enslaved people in the Caribbean and the American South. Trade routes that have transformed into the modern commodity markets, but haven't quite shaken off what they were built on. Slavery was abolished in British territories 40 years ago. The men who owned the enslaved people were compensated. The British government paid them, while the enslaved people themselves got nothing but freedom. The trade routes remained. You know about this because the man who taught you was a man in a pub who turned out to be a Methodist minister who had lost his congregation and was now drinking about it, and who told you the history of the sugar trade in the East End with the furious clarity of a man who's been furious about this for years. You stand on London Bridge and look at the ships and think about all the things those ships carry and what it costs, all the way down the chain to the people at the very bottom. The fog's lifting slightly this afternoon. There's a stretch of blue sky to the south over Suffolk, the first blue you've seen in a week. The Tower of London is visible from here. White stone, older than anything you can properly imagine, built by Normans for reasons that made sense in 1078 and still make a kind of terrible sense now. Right now, in 1873, the tower is a tourist attraction. Almost. They let visitors in to see the crown jewels and the armour. You've never been. The entrance fee is £1. £1 is a bed plus a meal. But maybe someday. The wind off the river is sharp and clean. Cleaner than the rest of the air. The Thames, whatever it carries in its water, moves the air in a way that dilutes the coal smoke and the crowd smell. Standing here you can almost imagine what this river smelled like before London grew up around it. You stand there for a long time, long enough that a gentleman passing with a dog looks at you twice. not with any particular interest, just the automatic survey that men perform, assessing what category of person they're dealing with. You look back at him steadily until he looks away. This too. 2 years ago you couldn't hold anyone's gaze for more than a second, too uncertain, too aware of yourself. Now you look back. It's a small thing. It matters. Monday starts the week again. You wake in bed 8 at Cooney's. You made it back before 10 with a shilling and threepence after Sunday's careful budgeting. And the morning is the same grey cold it always is, but something in the air is different. Mrs. Chambers is moving through the dormitory more quickly than usual, more urgently. Up, she's saying. Everyone up. There's a constable at the door. The dormitory moves from sleep to waking fast. This sound, constable at the door, produces a particular kind of alertness in women who have reason to be alert to constables. What's happened? Jessie, sitting up in her bed, voice rough from sleep. Nothing you need to worry about, Mrs. Chambers says, which everyone knows means there is something to worry about. Just everyone sit up and look decent. The constable, when he appears at the door, he stands at the threshold with his helmet and his notebook, is not Hicks. Good. It's a younger man with the slightly uncomfortable expression of someone doing a job he hasn't fully made peace with yet. He's looking for someone. He has a name. Elizabeth Stride. Have any of you seen a woman called Elizabeth Stride, Swedish-born, 40 years old, answers to Liza? Some of the women in the room know that name. You can see it in the small movements, the sitting back, the looking away, the particular stillness of someone who knows something and is deciding how much of it to share. You know the name vaguely. Swedish woman, works this neighbourhood. Not from this doss house. You've seen her face. You're almost certain. You say nothing. Most of the women say nothing. Jessie says flatly, not here. The constable makes a note, asks a few more questions, which nobody answers very specifically. Then he leaves. The room exhales. What happened to her? Someone asks. Nothing good, someone else says. Jessie gets up, gets dressed. You watch her face. Was she... You start. Don't know, Jessie says. Don't want to know, probably. Those are the only two options, and I prefer the one where I don't know. This is the pragmatism of this life stated plainly. You understand it completely. You've arrived at it yourself, over months of necessary decisions about what information to carry and what to let pass through you without holding it. You don't carry too much grief. There isn't room. Tuesday brings rain. Real rain, not the drizzle. The kind of November rain that has intentions, that soaks through your clothes to your skin in 20 minutes and doesn't stop. The kind of rain that turns the streets of the East End into something between a sewer and a river, that floods the low-lying courts and closes off certain routes you normally use. On rainy days, the economics shift. Men stay in, or they stay in the pubs rather than the streets. The kind of quick transaction that happens on a street corner doesn't happen on a street corner when it's raining this hard. Everything retreats inside, which means the places that are inside become more important and also more competitive. You spend 3 hours on a Tuesday afternoon sitting in the corner of the Britannia on Whitechapel High Street nursing a halfpenny gin because you have to buy something to stay, and watching the rain through the window and thinking, the Britannia is not the best pub and not the worst. It has sawdust on the floor that gets wet from everyone's boots and turns to paste by afternoon. It has a barmaid called Frances who has been here since before you arrived, and who has a particular expression for women who order one gin and then stay for 3 hours, which is not a welcoming expression but is not quite throwing you out either. The pub fills up as the afternoon goes on. Workers who've knocked off early because of the rain. Men without work who have somewhere to be out of the wet. The complicated interiors of working-class male sociability. The card games, the arguments, the close friendships that look, from outside, like barely contained hostility, which is maybe the same thing. A man asks if the seat across from you is taken. It isn't. He sits. He's maybe 50, a face that's been weathered by outdoor work, hands with ingrained dirt in the creases that won't wash out. He orders 2 gins and pushes one across to you without asking. It's a transaction, obviously, or it might be. In this pub, with these people, it might also just be a man who ordered 2 gins out of habit or habit that has lapsed into generosity. You take the gin. Thank you. Terrible weather, he says. Always this time of year. He laughs. You're not wrong. His name, it turns out, is George. He's a builder's labourer, which means he works when buildings are going up, and doesn't work when the weather makes building impossible, and November is full of impossible weather days. He's from the East End, properly from it, born here, the kind of Londoner who has never been further west than Cheapside, and doesn't see any reason to be. He talks. He's the kind of man who talks when he's been drinking, which is not the dangerous kind, just the expansive kind. He talks about the building trade and about the streets, and about the way the East End has changed since he was a boy, which is a complaint every generation makes and probably always has made. Used to be you could leave your door unlocked, he says, when I was young. Nobody's door was unlocked in Whitechapel when you were young, you say. He looks surprised, then grins. You're probably right. The rain hits the window. The pub is warm. The gin is not good gin, but it's warm in your chest. George is not a dangerous man. He's a tired man with no work in the rain, and a few shillings from last week and nothing pressing. He's company, nothing more than that. You stay until 4, then you go back out into the rain. The rain gets into your boots, not the new brown ones which you've been keeping dry, but the old cracked ones that you wore because you save better for when better matters. Your feet are wet again. The newspaper paste again. You think about leather, about cobblers, about the specific material distance between the life you have and the life you would need to be in to have an umbrella. An umbrella. What a thing it would be. The months in Whitechapel have taught you things that have no names in any respectable vocabulary. They've taught you the specific texture of cold at 3 in the morning versus cold at 5 in the afternoon, and how your body responds differently to both. They've taught you the hierarchy of the doss houses, which ones are cleaner, which ones are safer, which ones will let you in if you're 6pence short on a very bad night. They've taught you which streets at which times are navigable and which are not. They've taught you how to read a man in 30 seconds. Not perfectly. You've been wrong. Wrong in ways you try not to think about, but better than you were. Much better. They've taught you something about women. This is the thing you didn't expect. The solidarity. Not universal. This is not a story about universal solidarity. Some women in this world are as dangerous to you as any man, but specific and real, and between particular women on particular streets at particular times. Lizzie, who signals with her eyes, who has pulled you out of 2 situations that were becoming something worse than they started as, just by appearing at the right moment and saying something casual that reoriented the man's attention. Polly, who talks too much but who always notices who's new and who's struggling and who passes information, where to get cheap food, which constable to avoid, which landlady will extend credit without making it seem like charity. Mother Barnett, who sits in her chair and watches and knows and tells you only what she thinks you can use. They are not your family. This life didn't make you a family. but they are something, a network, a distributed knowledge, the accumulated wisdom of women surviving in a place that doesn't particularly want them to survive, passed along in the gaps between transactions, in the doorways, in the soup queues, in the brief spaces between the arithmetic and the walking. Wednesday evening brings something unexpected. You're on the street. It's around 9, and you hear singing. Not pub singing. The pub singing you know. It goes in a specific direction. It gets louder and less melodious as the evening goes on. It has a particular quality of voices that have been drinking for several hours. This is different, clearer, more organised. You follow the sound because following sounds on streets you know is not dangerous, and because you're curious, and curiosity in this life is one of the few things that cost nothing. It's the Salvation Army. They're on a corner of Commercial Street, a group of maybe 15 people with their brass instruments and their bonnets and their absolute conviction. They're playing hymns, the ones with tunes you half remember from the church at home, the church with the draughty nave and the vicar who spoke too fast. The Salvation Army has been in the East End for a few years now. They're not universally loved. The publicans hate them because the Salvationists stand outside the pubs and tell people the drink will kill them, which is both true and unwelcome information. Some of the street women find them suffocating because the Salvationists run homes for fallen women that have a certain number of conditions attached to the falling less. But there's something in the music that catches at you in a way you don't expect. Maybe it's just that it's music, real music, played by people who mean it, on a cold November street, for nothing, no cover charge, no one taking anything from you. You stand and listen. A Salvationist woman in her bonnet approaches you. You brace for the pamphlet, for the question about your soul. She just hands you something hot, a cup, tea. Cold night, she says. Always is this time of year, you say. She smiles at this, as if it's funny, which it almost is. Take as long as you like with that. She moves on to the next person. You drink the tea and listen to the hymns, and the fog comes down from the north, and the brass instruments sound something like silver in the cold. This is the moment, tonight's moment, the tea and the hymns and the fog. Thursday. A boy you've never seen before comes to the door of Cooney's asking for you. Not asking for Agnes, asking for the woman in bed 8. Mrs. Chambers fetches you with an expression of mild suspicion. The boy is maybe 12, ragged, a face that's been doing hard work for a while. He has a note. The note is from Polly. Polly's handwriting is not elegant, but it's legible. It says, "Come to Brick Lane. Afternoon. There's a woman who'll pay you for a day's work. Decent work. Sorting rags at a warehouse. 3 shillings for a full day. Tell her Polly sent you. You go." The woman is a rag sorter's widow who's taken over her husband's business after his death, and who runs it with the specific efficiency of a woman who's been doing the actual work anyway for 20 years, and simply has more authority now. Her name is Mrs. Holt. She's 60, and looks it, and doesn't care. The warehouse smells like old cloth and dust and the particular staleness of fabric that has been many things over many years. Rags come in from all over London. Old clothes, old linens, old curtains, old anything. And they get sorted by type and quality and sent on to paper mills and shoddy mills and other processes that turn worn-out things into slightly less worn-out things. You sort rags. It's not difficult work. It's also not easy. The dust gets into your throat within the first hour, and the rags include everything from relatively clean old linen to things that have been in ditches, and you wear a cloth over your face because Mrs. Holt gives you one, and says the alternative is lung trouble. But it's warm. The warehouse has a stove and the bodies of 6 women working, and the rags themselves have some insulating quality. It's warm in a way that the streets are never warm, and it's something you know how to do. You don't need to be afraid of it. You don't need to be on guard in the specific exhausting way. You just sort. Old silk dress, once blue, sort to the silk pile. Cotton apron, very worn, sort to the cotton pile. Something that was possibly a curtain, a child's dress, small grey wool. You try not to think about the child's dress. Score, fold, tuck, sort. You fall into the rhythm of it. There is something almost meditative about this. Almost, if you don't think too hard about the tuppence per gross, or the width of your fingertips, or the distance between this warehouse and the life you used to think you'd have. By the time Mrs. Holt counts out your wages, you've done 10 hours, 3 shillings exactly. You hold the coins, and they're heavier than they should be in your palm, or they feel that way. 3 shillings for honest work. Same again next Thursday, Mrs. Holt says. Not a question, an offer. Same again next Thursday, you agree. You walk home with 3 shillings and the specific tiredness that comes from 10 hours of physical work, which is different from the tiredness of the streets. Cleaner. You've used your body for something that made something, however small, and the exhaustion has a shape and a reason. The dust from the warehouse is still in your hair. You can taste it slightly in the back of your throat. But 3 shillings, Friday. It rains again. In the rain, in the afternoon near Bucks Row, you find a woman sitting in a doorway who shouldn't be there. Not sitting, slumped, with her head against the brick and her eyes open but not looking at anything in particular, and an empty bottle beside her that had gin in it. She's breathing. You check, because you've been in situations where they weren't, and you check now by habit. She's breathing, but she's very cold. Her hands are blue at the fingertips. You look up and down the street. The rain is making everything difficult. People don't walk slowly in rain. They move through it on their way somewhere else. You don't know this woman. She's not from Cooney's, or from anywhere on your usual route. She's older than you, late 40s, maybe 50, with grey in her hair and hands that have been red and rough for years. You could keep walking. In this life, in this city, you could keep walking, and it would be the logical thing, the self-preserving thing. Stopping costs time, stopping costs energy. Stopping sometimes means police, which is a problem. You stop. Hey, you say. Nothing. You crouch down, which puts you below street level and in the wet, and you shake her arm gently. She stirs, eyes focus, looks at you with the particular blankness of someone who is still mostly somewhere else. You need to move, you say. You're too cold. She blinks. I can't carry you, you say, which is true, but I can help you stand. It takes a few minutes. She's unsteady. The gin, the cold, whatever else. But you get her upright with her arm over your shoulder, and she's lighter than she looks, and you walk her to the end of the street where there's a wall in an angle of 2 buildings that cuts the wind. She sits. More deliberately this time, pulls her coat together. Tar, she says. 1 syllable. Where are you going, you ask. She names a lodging house on Dorset Street. Can you walk there? She seems to assess this. In a bit. You wait with her for a few minutes. The rain keeps on. Your boots, the new brown ones, are getting wet after all because you didn't plan to be crouching in puddles today. She rallies. You can see it happen. Something coming back into her face. You from round here? She asks. Flower and Dean Street. She nods. I'm Dorset Street. Annie Chapman. Agnes Dyer. She looks at you with the frankness of a woman who has assessed her own situation and others without any particular illusions. You're on the street. Yes. Don't stay out this late in the rain, she says. I've done it too many times. It gets in you. She looks at her blue-tinged hands. Gets in your chest and doesn't come out. You think about this. Go somewhere warm, she says, even if it costs. She straightens fully, seems mostly to be back. Thank you, she says. Take care of yourself, you say. She walks off in the direction of Dorset Street, unsteady but moving. You watch her for a moment. Then you go the other way. The thing about this life is it doesn't build toward anything in a straight line. You didn't understand this for a long time. You kept expecting an arc, a narrative, the story where things get worse and then something happens and then they get better. That's how stories work. That's how the philanthropic pamphlets describe the lives of women in your situation. The descent, the crisis, the rescue. Your story is not that story. Your story is Thursday at the rag warehouse, and Friday in the rain, and Saturday evening being better, and Tuesday being worse. It's 3p for paper bags and a shilling for Mrs. O'Brien's room, and 4p for the bed and a cup of soup in the street. It's Lizzie's nod and Mother Barnett's warnings and Jessie's flat good nights. It's a month of the same, and then another month. And then you look back and something has shifted. Not in a single moment, but across the accumulation of days. You've been here 2 years. You know what that means better than you knew it 6 months ago. 2 years is long enough to know the weather patterns. Long enough to have worn through one pair of boots entirely and started on the second. Long enough for your face to have changed in the mirror that tells you true things about yourself, whether you want them or not. But here's what you've learned. You're good at this. Not good in the sense of proud. Not good in the sense you'd choose. But good in the sense of competent. Good in the sense of still here. You know how to navigate. You know how to read a street and a man and a situation. You know where the warmth is and where the food is and who to trust and who to avoid and when to stay and when to move on. You know things about this city that people with comfortable lives will never know. The texture of it, the human underground of it, the way it works at the level where everything is immediate and nothing is theoretical. This knowledge is yours, paid for, paid, not something anyone can take from you. Late November, a particular night. You're on Commercial Street near 10 o'clock, later than you usually stay out, because tonight has been slow. The fog, thick as wool, the kind of fog that cuts everything off. You can barely see the lamp on the corner. You can hear the street better than you can see it. Your feet know the way. After 2 years, your feet know the way without your eyes. A sound behind you. Not footsteps exactly. More like the absence of something. The particular shift in ambient sound that means someone is following you at the same pace, matching it. The cold across the back of your neck is a different cold from the air. Mother Barnett's words. Pays up front. You keep walking. Don't run. Running makes them chase. You've been in this situation before. Usually it resolves. Usually. There's a pub ahead. The Britannia lit up, warm, crowded. 30 feet. You don't run. 20 feet. You push through the door of the Britannia. The noise hits you. The warmth. The specific crush of bodies. You don't look back immediately. You go to the bar, you order a gin. You have your hands on the bar and you're breathing steadily. Because you've been breathing steadily on purpose for the last 30 feet, and you're not going to stop now. Frances the barmaid, who has seen everything, looks at you over the gin. You all right? Fine, you say. I'm going to be here a while. She doesn't ask any questions. She puts the gin down and moves to the next customer. You wait. The man does not follow you into the pub. You wait 20 minutes. Drink the gin slowly. Watch the door. He doesn't come. You wait another 10 minutes. Then Polly appears at the bar, damp from the fog, shaking it off her shawl, looking for Francis and an ale. "Polly," you say. "Agnes, you look terrible." "Walk with me back to Flower and Dean." She looks at you, reads something in your face, doesn't ask what. "Course," she says. She finishes her ale and you go together. Two women in the fog, talking about nothing. The weather, the price of bread, something she heard from a woman who heard from someone else. Nothing follows you. You're at the door of Cooney's in 8 minutes. "Thank you," you say. "Don't mention it," she says, and means it literally. "Don't mention it. This happened, we move on, we're fine." She turns back toward the high street. You go inside, the dormitory, bed 8, the straw crinkle, the blanket that still scratches, 2 years later, still scratches. The candle on the shelf at the far end of the room burns low. Most of the women are asleep or almost asleep. Someone is coughing, the same cough as always, the November cough that doesn't stop. You lie down without undressing, too tired for anything else. Your feet, you should take your boots off. You take your boots off. The left one, the new brown one, is damp. You put both under the bed. The ceiling, the watermark above bed 8, the one that looks like a map. You've been staring at it for 2 years and you've still not decided what country it's a map of. You've decided it's somewhere south, somewhere with coast, somewhere that is warm, probably. The sounds of the dormitory settle around you. Breathing, the shift of women in their sleep, the distant permanent sound of the city. There's always sound, even now, even at nearly midnight, because the Thames never stops, and the night workers never stop, and London doesn't know how to stop. You close your eyes. Here is what you know. Thursday is the rag warehouse. 3 shillings. Mrs. Holt and the dust and the 10 warm hours. Paper bags on some mornings. The coffee stall at 7, the penny tea, the bread, the new brown boots which will keep water out until the soul wears through, Polly and Lizzie and Mother Barnett and Jessie, the specific knowledge of each of them, the particular reliability, the things you can count on, the soup on Saturdays, the washhouse on Sundays when you have the shilling, the things you've survived. The thing about survival is it doesn't announce itself. You don't wake up one morning and receive a formal notification that you've survived. It just accumulates. Day by day, degree by degree, each managed crisis and each solved arithmetic, and each cold morning navigated becoming, over time, the evidence that you're still here. You're still here. Some things you hold. You hold the image of the Thames from London Bridge, the masts, the water that is not quite brown and not quite grey, the blue sky south of Suffolk on one specific Sunday afternoon in November. You hold the soup from the church kitchen, the weight of the bowl in your cold hands, the specific pleasure of something hot in cold hands, which is one of the absolute pleasures available at all levels of existence democratic. You hold Alice from the soup queue, the girl from Hertfordshire. You don't know what happened to her. Maybe she went to the hostel on Eric Street. Maybe she found work in the laundry. Maybe she's somewhere that isn't this. You hope so. You'll probably never know. You hold Mother Barnett in her chair on Thrall Street, the knitting needles clicking in the cold. Don't let the city grind that out of you. You hold it. The candle gutters. Someone blows it out. Not you. You're already most of the way gone. And the room becomes the particular darkness of a room inside a building inside a city that produces its own light from 1,000 gas lamps and fires and windows. So even darkness in London is not quite dark, just darker. The sounds slow. The coughing stops for a while. The rain, which has been on and off all day, is off again. Your body lets go. The specific release of muscles that have been braced against the cold all day, all week, all month. Your shoulders dropping, your hands unclenching from whatever they've been holding. Just the mattress, the scratchy blanket, the sound of 39 women breathing. You think about nothing, or you think about everything, but it slows. The way things slow when the body insists on sleep and the mind runs out of ways to resist. Tomorrow will be the same and different. Tomorrow will be cold and complicated and require the arithmetic and the walking. Tomorrow Constable Hicks might be on the beat, or he might not. Tomorrow there might be work at Mrs. Holt's, or there might not be for a week. But tonight there's just this. Here's what nobody writes in the pamphlets about the fallen women of the East End, what the reformers don't include in their reports, what the newspapers don't put in their stories about the moral degradation of the urban poor. You are not degraded, you are tired. You are cold on a Wednesday and hungry on a Thursday and frightened on a Friday night with footsteps behind you in the fog. But you are also the woman who talked Alice through the soup queue, who sorted 12 hours of rags in the warm warehouse, who negotiated the price of second-hand boots down to a price that was fair, who stood on London Bridge and watched the Empire move through the masts of the ships in the Pool, and thought about where rubber comes from and who paid for the sugar trade and whether somewhere south and warm has a coast that looks like the watermark above Bed 8. You are a woman with knowledge that cost you everything to get and that you would not choose to have had to learn. You're a woman who is still here. The city is still out there. It always is. It never stops. But tonight, in the darkness, in the warmth of 39 women breathing, tonight you are warm enough, fed enough, safe enough. You have a roof above you and a blanket over you, and tomorrow is not today, and that's enough. That has to be enough, and it is. The sounds get further away, the Thames moving. Somewhere, a cart on cobblestones, going somewhere that needs to be reached before morning. A dog. The particular sound of the East End in the small hours. Not silence. Never silence. But a version of itself that's softer, that has given up some of its urgency. You sink into the softness. The cold is still there, but distant now. The arithmetic is still there, but quiet. The weight of the week is still there, but you've set it down, finally, here at the end of it. Set it down. Let it be heavy somewhere else for a while. Let the dormitory hold you. The scratchy blanket, the straw mattress, the sound of breathing that means you're not alone in the dark. Let sleep come the way it comes when you've earned it. When you've done everything that could be done today and there's nothing left to do but this descent, this softness. Somewhere, centuries away from this moment, someone is listening to this story. In a room that is warm in a way that Cooney's dormitory never was. In a bed that is soft in a way that the straw mattress could never be. In a city that has grown up and over and past this Whitechapel, that has paved and lit and rebuilt this same patch of ground a dozen times, until almost nothing is left of what you know. But people still live here. Different people, different lives, different circumstances, but people, they still worry, still count what they have, still look at the sky and wonder what the weather will do, still sit in doorways and move through fog, still find the one moment in the day that was worth holding. The human arithmetic doesn't change. The need for rest at the end of a long day doesn't change. The way a warm blanket feels when your body finally lets go, that doesn't change either. So let it come. Wherever you are, whatever your own arithmetic is, whatever your own November has been, let it come. Let the sounds get further. Let the weight set down. Let your hands unclench. You've been carrying things all day. You've been navigating all day. You've been cold or tired or worried or all three at once. But not right now. Right now is just this. The warmth, the dark, the breathing. All those women sleeping in their beds who are just women trying to get through, carrying their knowledge and their cold and their particular survival. They rested. They slept. They woke up and did it all again. And some of them made it through. And the ones who didn't, they're still worth knowing. Still worth lying here in the dark and holding in your mind carefully, like something fragile and real. Agnes Dyer, Flower and Dean Street, bed 8, with the watermark above it that looks like a map of somewhere south. Still there, still here. Good night.